Hi, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Wonder Snatch. Today is another drag race review post the big opening part 2, okay, where I'm going to talk about Daya Betty. Okay, Daya Betty was unfortunately eliminated prematurely. She's also another contestant with a chronic disease, and this time it's diabetes. So I'm going to talk about diabetes, how it affects the skin, and also a rundown of the episode, while I do a Daya Betty press junket look where she turns herself into a statue. If that's something you want to see, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and ring that bell for post notifications, alright? Alright, see you in a bit. Alright, I'm back. Block the brows and put my face tapes on. Like my little spit curl I've got there. You can't really see. I got a black background today because I'm going to do some negative space illusion today. Alright? Okay, so let's just get started. So, Daya Betty. I kind of pegged her to go around, midway, but I didn't expect her to go so fast, okay? She did give a bit of an energy during her Meet the Queens and everything, which hinted to me that she wasn't going to stay very long. But I really, really like her, and I'm watching her makeup tutorials in preparation for this. She has such a fun, cool personality. I really hate to see her go. Anyway, who knows? Orion Story and both Daya Betty might be back for something. I don't know. I don't think we've seen the last of them yet. Okay, let's just get started. Let's get rid of this shit. I'm going to paint myself a bit of a grayish color now. Okay, priming with milk. Okay, so diabetes. Diabetes is a pretty common condition, okay? In America, it's about 10% of the population has diabetes. In Singapore, the last stats suggest it's about the same, okay? 10 to 11%. It seems to be a disease that's increasing in prevalence, okay? Over the years, more and more people are getting diabetes. Diabetes is basically a disorder of glucose metabolism, okay? Our body just can't handle sugar as it should. Using my Athena palette again, I'll be mixing the white, a lot of the white, a bit of blue, always a little bit of blue in grey, I think, and a little bit of black. Okay, not so much. Okay, that gives you this cool toned kind of a grey that will do as a base. So the main hallmark, the main problem with diabetes is that your blood sugar is too high, okay, because you can't control it. Okay, so everything you eat goes straight to the bloodstream. Initially, at the beginning of the disease, you don't really feel anything. That's why diabetes can actually creep up on you. Okay, and the main culprit, the main hormone culprit of diabetes is insulin. Okay, insulin is produced by the pancreas, and in response to a meal, your pancreas will secrete insulin, and insulin will help the sugar get into the cells. Without insulin, the sugar basically just stays in the blood, okay? And a lot of it is filtered out through the urine. And that's why diabetics have a lot of sugar in their urine as well. And in the ancient times, they noticed this, that ants were actually attracted to the urine, okay? And before test strips were available, there were these things called water testers where people actually tasted people's urine to see how bad the diabetes was. Good thing we don't do that anymore. Okay, and the word diabetes itself comes from the word siphon, okay, because they used to think that it was a disease where everything was being siphoned out of your body. The sugar was leaving the body and people would tend to waste away, okay, and this is why they called it diabetes. Later on, they added the term mellitus next to it, and mellitus is a Greek word for honey. That's because of the sweetness of the urine. And as we mentioned before, there's a type 1 and a type 2 diabetes, okay. Daya Betty has type 1 diabetes, and that's an autoimmune form of the disease where your body actually attacks the pancreas and destroys the cells that produce insulin, causing your insulin levels to disappear, okay, very quickly in childhood. There are a few conditions that are associated with this type of autoimmune diabetes, which I'll talk about later, and one of them is alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune form of hair loss. So there is a little bit of a skin-hair connection there. Okay, so you're just using white now just to cover the brows. This is just to maintain the highlights. Okay, and today I think I will try a brush method to get on this body paint. Okay, and so type 1 is an autoimmune form of diabetes, and type 2 is where you actually develop diabetes later in life, and this is usually associated with obesity and what we call insulin resistance, and that's when your body stops responding to the insulin that you're actually producing. This results in your pancreas being extremely stressed, okay, because when your body can't respond to the insulin, the sugar goes up in the body and the rest of the hormones are all kicking in to try to make the pancreas produce more insulin, and then the insulin gets produced more and more until at some point the pancreas fails because it's too stressed out, and this is when patients will require insulin. Before this stage, they can take medications that increase their sensitivity to insulin, start medications like metformin and stuff like that. So Daya Betty would probably have to have insulin on the set of Drag Race, which probably was a little bit tricky for everyone there. I'm wondering whether that's why she was eliminated so early. I'm pretty sure they didn't want to have any complications for, her treatment or anything. If they, a very stressed day, if they don't eat anything, she can easily become hypoglycemic and pass out. That's what Rupaul mentioned at the beginning. So maybe they eliminated her early so they didn't have to deal with all that. I don't know. So actually, the history of insulin is very, very interesting. The whole history of how we figured out how diabetes work and treatments for diabetes is a real feat, okay, of medicine and science. Okay, the coverage doesn't have to be absolutely flawless, mainly because, a statue kind of looks kind of a little bit off sometimes. Highlight my Miron, clown right. Daya Betty starts off with her liner as well, okay, so I'm going to do that too. Okay, yeah, so before they even realized that insulin was something that helped people with diabetes, people were trying all sorts of weird diets, starvation diets, high-fat, high-protein diets. They kind of knew that sugar was involved, but no one really understood how exactly it worked. It wasn't until earlier in this century when people were just messing around with some dogs and they removed the pancreas of some dogs, and they found that when they removed the pancreas, these dogs developed high sugar levels, okay, and diabetes. So this is one of the first animal models, and once you have an animal model, you can pretty much fool around with it to figure out how this works. Of course, these days animal studies are highly regulated, okay, to make sure that the animals are ethically handled, but at the time you could do almost anything, okay. So they just removed pancreases from dogs and found out that kind of like precipitated diabetes. And when they took pancreas from healthy dogs, ground it up and injected it back into the dogs without pancreases, that kind of cured the diabetes, or at least controlled it. So they knew that the pancreas created something that, helped diabetes. This was, of course, later found to be insulin. And in 1922, they gave it to the very first patient to receive insulin. This patient called Leonard Thompson. Okay, he was 14 years old and had type 1 diabetes. At the time, if you have type 1 diabetes, you're probably dead before you're 20, okay? But they managed to keep him alive to his late 20s when he died of pneumonia. They said it's not diabetes related, but as I'm going to mention later, people with diabetes actually do have a little bit of compromised immune systems. So it might have been still a contributing factor of how Leonard Thompson died. Okay, using my angled brush and the black, I'm just going to use this to map out my vein. So diabetes makeup is definitely very, very much inspired by Crystal Method. Okay, they both go in with heavy creams first, and then go in and intensify it with color. Okay, their lips are also quite similar, and that's where Ru unfortunately calls Daya Betty a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy of Crystal Method, which I think was a little bit uncalled for. I mean, the way that Ru was so in love with Crystal Method the first time during season 12, and even Ru obviously was enamored with Crystal Method. I think maybe the way that Daya Betty kind of resembled Crystal Method too much maybe gave Ru some heebie-jeebies, I don't know. So cover the entire lid with black. Her brows for this look were a bit like a curvy S thing. Okay, time to set. I think it's time to retire this sponge. I've used it for like 3 years. Look at how gross it is. It's really a piece of shit. I guess it's time to throw it away. Okay, let's set with the white. Okay, I'm setting with white because I want to tone down this grey. Okay, I'll go in and intensify the colors with powders, but I don't want it to be too stone grey because Daya Betty's look was still a little bit white, a bit more like a marble. Where was I? Yeah, so after they discovered insulin, they started to mass produce it, and they used to get it from cows and pigs. Cows that were slaughtered, the pancreas were removed and purified for insulin. This was given to patients, and of course you can tell from this the level of purity was not very good, okay, but this was the way people got insulin for many, many decades until the advent of genetic engineering, which I'm going to talk about when I get back and let this all bake. Okay, I'll be right back. All right, and I'm back. Now I'm going to start off with the eyes, okay? I'm going to start off with just blending out the eyes before I draw in my brow later. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my Cara Beauty, my grayscale Cara Beauty, which is pretty good. Going into this shade called Narcissus. I'm just going to blend that in here. Yeah, and so in 1978, they developed the very first lab-grown insulin. And this is when they used genetic engineering to insert the insulin gene into, okay, a bacteria which started to produce insulin in the lab. And you can purify this and use it in patients. So it was very, very successful. Okay, and this is probably what we're using today. And this really started off the whole genetic revolution, and people started to make more and more medications with genetic engineering. Okay, I'm going to use the same narcissus and bring this down the nose. And of course, I'm going to mention that the people who discovered insulin, Banting, Best, and MacLeod, won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1923. Okay, deepen that a little bit more, and now add the black. And nowadays, insulin comes in many different forms, okay? You have things like your Nova Rapid, which is basically insulin that's very fast acting that you can take right after your meals. And things like your Insulatard, okay, which is a long-acting insulin when you can take at the beginning of the day and last all day. And you can use combinations of these things to adjust the need of insulin to patients with diabetes and their lifestyle. Blacken the liner bits. Okay, we'll cover that with liner again later, but that's not on. Okay, so blended that all out. Alright, gonna draw in those brows. I'm gonna make them a bit of a squiggly one like she does. Okay, yeah, and so for diabetes, after the invention of, insulin, it really reduced the morbidity and mortality of the disease. People used to die very early from diabetes, and now they can live almost full lives. Okay, but having diabetes, even well-controlled diabetes, does put you at risk for a whole bunch of other issues as well. And the main problem is because of the high sugar levels, okay? And high sugar levels in the blood can actually damage cells all over the body. And this is why you get things like neuropathy, where your nerves are damaged and you get numbness in your fingers and your toes, or vasculopathy, where your blood vessels are just not working very well, and that's why you're increased risk of stroke and high blood pressure. Okay, and diabetes can also affect the skin and hair, and I'll discuss this when I get back after I cut my crease and just clean up a little bit. Alright, so I've darkened up the eyes a little bit. Daya Betty does this all the way around kind of look, so I'm going for that too. Okay, now I'm just going to go in with the rest of the face. Just going to contour first, and then I'm going to start painting my body. Alright, so how can diabetes cause issues with skin and hair? As I mentioned, diabetes can mess with your blood supply and your nerves, okay? And a lot of diabetics actually get ulcers, okay? When the nerves in your feet and your ankles don't work very well, you injure yourself very easily, and wound healing is not very good. So a lot of people get venous ulcers, and these get infected. So a lot of complications from diabetes actually come from ulcers. And when the blood supply to that area becomes compromised, they can predispose people to amputations as well. Contour with the same shades. Sculpting the stone. Other kinds of skin conditions can be associated with diabetes as well. So insulin resistance, as I mentioned, the type 2 diabetics, there's this condition called acanthosis nigricans, which is associated with insulin resistance, and that's when you get this velvety blackish skin over the neck and the armpits. Okay, some people develop this quite early on, and when you do this, you need to check that these patients do not have diabetes. Other weird skin conditions that people can get, they can get this yellowish kind of rash on their shins, and this is called necrobiosis lipoidica. Okay, it's also associated with diabetes as well. Some patients get what we call diabetic dermopathy, really dark, almost look like scars on the shins and the legs, okay? We think this is probably due to impaired blood supply to the small vessels in the skin itself, causing these marks. So a lot of people with diabetes have this skin condition as well. I'm gonna pop into my black. Okay, we can afford to make it a little bit patchy because I'm going to go in with a whole bunch of texturizing later for the stone illusion. I'm going to use the white. Just snatch it a little bit. Okay, while that sits, I'm going to start painting my body. Okay, let's map out this bust look. She made kind of like this costume where she put a head on top, but I'm going to try to do this with body paint, and I'm going to have boobs as well. They're called boobs, Ed. It's going to be my bust. I'm going to have some draping here. I'm going to do some negative space as well, so I can hide these muscles. Okay, I'm adding a bit more white. Okay, this is, previously it was a little bit too gray. People with diabetes don't really have much hair issues. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, alopecia areata, which is the autoimmune form of hair loss, is maybe associated with type 1 diabetes because they both have this kind of autoimmune tendencies. So that sometimes can overlap. People with diabetes, high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, and obesity seem to be more likely to have androgenetic alopecia or pattern baldness. This has been suggested in many studies, but because both diabetes and pattern baldness are so common, it's very hard to actually make that correlation. But check out my follicle follies this week. I have a little bit of a science paper linking obesity, okay, and high-fat diets to hair loss. So check that out, okay, later this week. Sometimes patients can have issues with their injection sites, okay, insulin injection sites. Some people, when they inject insulin for long periods of time, they can get some scarring or even some collections, okay, some what we call granulomas in the area where they inject, like the lower abdomen. And I'm going in with some white just to highlight the areas. Okay, I'm going straight into my clown white for this. Yeah, so that's diabetes in a nutshell and how it can affect skin and hair. Okay, I'm going to set this and maybe do my boobage, okay, off camera, and I'll be back to talk about the rest of the big opening part 2 of RuPaul's Drag Race. See you in a bit. A little bit along now, I've traced all this out with body paint. I'm going to paint all this black later so I look like a floating bust. Okay, and I'm going to do some shading on the breasts and this area now using powders. Okay, so what do you think of this episode of Drag Race? Definitely not as good as the first part of the opening, okay, where we've got Willow Pill and Cornbread, but these queens are really, really good too, okay? I've misjudged several of them as well. I think Jasmine Candy is really, really charismatic, okay? She looks so much like Alyssa Edwards in some parts in the confessionals. She has this really goofy smile, this big toothy smile, and her transformation is amazing, and her wigs are gorgeous as well. Okay? I think I really misjudged Jasmine Candy, and I'm really excited to see what she shows. The entrance looks amazing. Okay, Georges. Oh, Georges is another one that's really, really, really exciting. She's really, really tiny, but her drag is amazing because she knows exactly what to do with her body to make herself look a lot bigger. Okay, the ostrich feather thing she came in with was beautiful, and she always does a lot of, whenever she poses, she does a lot of hands up and everything that extends her, and the way that she walks on the runway, when she throws her hips out and everything, that really, really extends her. I think people can really learn how to extend yourself by watching Georges. Okay, Deja Sky, not great. Okay, she looks a little bit like Sherry Pie in the confessionals. Her entrance look was terrible. Okay, this really weird draping. She calls it pastel, but it wasn't really pastel. It was a really crunchy pastel neon kind of wig, which I don't think looked very, very good. But she does seem like she's going to be one of the personality queens. Okay, and of course, Metamorphosis, our straight cisgender queen. They definitely started to discuss it right off the bat. And there was this scene where Daya Betty seemed to hint that Metamorphosis is packing heat or something. So, yeah. Metamorphosis does seem a little bit left out of the conversation at the beginning, okay? She seems a bit shy and a bit worried that people would judge her for being straight, so she definitely took a while to warm up. Standout entrance looks definitely Georges, looked stunning, okay? I really want to recreate this ostrich feather thing, and her hair was amazing. Okay, her human hair ponytails must have cost a lot. The way that she's whipping them around, that's definitely human. Yeah, I think Jasmine Candy looked really good too. I really loved her hair in the entrance. Daya Betty looked great also. Okay, her mullet, she's really into mullets. I love mullets these days. After this, they're thrown into the first challenge, which is just taking pictures of a Tic Tac. Ru was giving off some really cringy acting here. But I think what I would have done is I would have buried myself in the Tic Tacs strategically. But I don't think the Tic Tac pool was deep enough, okay? It looked only maybe about 2 or 3 inches of Tic Tac, so maybe they couldn't do that. And the lighting was really homophobic. This really overhead lighting, and none of them could find the light very well, and some of them looked really, really awful. I'm trying to make this look like fabric. Okay, I need to figure that out off camera, and I'll be right back. I'm back. Okay, I've painted this a little bit. Okay, so that looks a bit more like a bust. I need to cover that black up a little bit more there. I've got my grey lenses in. I really wanted my white out lenses, but my white out lenses kind of all dried up. Oh yeah, and also they had this really offensive gold star gay discussion where they were talking about not having sex with women. I think it's really it's a bit misogynistic, okay, the way they talk. I mean, if you talk about gold star gays, you kind of get a medal for not having sex with a woman. I think that's really quite misogynistic. I think they should really try to phase that out. But I think they kept that in just because they wanted to show the interactions of Maddie, Morphosis, and the rest of the queens as well. So yeah, they probably kept that really offensive nonsense in. But yeah, that's not something that we should be using anymore. This round of talents weren't very exciting. I mean, most of them lip-synced, okay? And I think they try to make it a lot more exciting than it is. I mean, George's, although she was really technically wonderful, she got a yes, bitch from Rupaul, even though it was just a random lip sync. But you know, as I said, George's moves amazingly. She reuses her body very well, and I think she will be. She's a great contender. Maddie Morphosis did this kind of a guitar thing, expected for a straight drag queen. I mean, there wasn't any tongue-in-cheek bit about it, so I think that's what might, you know, ding her. But her runway was amazing. Her runway was like this hitless Marie Antoinette campy thing, okay? She was called up by this other queen called Dita Von Queef, who said she stole it from her. But you know, these things are not really that original anymore. I mean, even my friend Sam Jo did it for Halloween last year. It's probably an idea that's been going around, so I don't think anyone can really claim this Marie Antoinette kind of thing. Okay. There we go. Now I look more like a floating head. That looks quite good. Oh. See what I can draw out. This bust. Broken bust thing here. Lady Camden is another one that I think I might have misunderstood. Okay, in my Meet the Queens rundown, I said that her look was a little bit disjointed, but now I understand her references. Okay, she's going for this 90s raver kind of reference. No one's ever done it before. Okay, and I think that's quite exciting. It's a kind of a style that I think is untapped, and I think she's done it quite well. A little bit tacky and a little bit fun as well. Okay, and I think it really suits her personality too. Yeah, and this is where Ru calls Daya Betty a Xerox copy of Crystal Method, which I thought that was quite unfair. Okay, just highlighting a little bit more here and there. The lip sync was actually quite good. I think both of them did really, really well, but Daya Betty was, I think, already in her head. And you know, she was walking all over Deja Sky's outfit and her nipples started showing, and I think that was a death knell for her. And she's wearing this amazing Wigs by Golgi, which I'm going to talk about in my Follicle Follies too, okay? Wigs by Golgi is an amazing wig account, which I think you all should follow immediately. Okay, so I'm just going to put some finishing touches, throw on some lashes and my wig, and I'll be right back with a wrap up, okay? See you in a bit. And I'm back, and this is the finished look. I made a headpiece out of styrofoam and ears made of styrofoam as well. This is kind of like what Daya Betty was wearing, okay? So I'm a bust work of art. How did I do? I think it looks really cool, okay? I'm like a floating bust now. Alright, so very sad to see Daya Betty leave, okay? I hope she comes back. I'm pretty sure they're going to showcase more of them in the future. Alright, and if you like this video, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And ring that bell for post notifications, alright? Okay, I'm going to film my Follicle Follies right now, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I've got this black backdrop a long time ago. It's quite fun making these illusion makeups. This was my Christmas hair. Still have my red things that I usually hide those. Alright, check out my last video where I talked about cystinosis and also where I talked about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and then Evie Oddly look. Bye! Hands not painted.